It was Tuesday, this past October 18th. I was finishing up my internship with a hospice called Carolina Care, and I decided to work with the Cardinal Kids, which is the terminally ill program for families whose children are very ill. But I wanted that experience. So as we pulled into the driveway of this young family who just lost their daughter, Ellie, just a few weeks earlier, we walked in, we were greeted very warmly by the mother. The father and young son were at work, and as we made our way into the living room, we sat there and I just was there as an observer, just to listen. And as she shared her story about Ellie, her 5-year-old bouncy little daughter that just flowed through the living room, she shared with us some very intimate stories about her young daughter's young life. As we sat there, the young mother looked at me with tears streaming down her face, and she reached over and she took my hands, and we just listened as she spoke. And over about 2 hours later, we were getting ready to leave, and she took me by the hands again, and she said, "Stephen, I know you're a stranger, and I know I don't know you very well. But as we stood up and tears were running down her face and tears were running down my face, she looked at me and she said, but I will forever remember your tears. I will forever remember your tears." This is the type of intimacy that Paul had with his young evangelist Timothy when he wrote his second letter from the Roman prison. And he was expressing to Timothy in a very compassionate, intimate way, the way this mother had shared her story with me, when he wrote the first sentence. And he said, "I remember you in my prayers, night and day, greatly desiring to see you, mindful of your tears, that I may be filled with joy." Mindful of your tears, that I might be filled with joy. This is the topic of the sermon, recalling your tears. And as Timothy received his letter, as Paul wrote it, he was trying to express to this young apostle what he would be facing and the persecution he would be enduring over the years that lie ahead. This intimate, personal letter that Paul wrote to Timothy was expressing to him, probably in all likelihood, his last letter, encouraging him to face the future with faith and determination, the way that Paul had faced his journey. You see, Timothy had spent some time with Paul on his travels back and forth across the missionary journeys, and they had developed a very strong bond. And it was this bond between them that Paul felt obligated to share with Timothy in his last letter what he's going to be challenged by as he had been. As I began reading the 3rd chapter, Paul wrote these words. "But you have carefully followed my doctrine and manner of life, purpose, faith, long-suffering, love, perseverance, persecutions, afflictions, what happened to me at Antioch, Icon, and Lystra. What persecution I endured. And out of all of them, Timothy, God had delivered me. God had delivered me. He was saying to Timothy in so many words, Timothy, you're going to be faced with these issues, with these persecutions that I have done, but you have to hold on to your faith in spite of the obstacles. Hold on to your faith in spite of the problems you're going to be facing. So I ask you this morning, in your journey of faith, what obstacles have you faced? Have you held on to your faith in times of trials the way Paul did? Now, we are not persecuted in the 21st century as they were back then, but we are still facing our own persecutions in our own ways. What is it about our faith journey that we have to hold fast to as we travel during our life? There's not a person in this room this morning that at one time or another has not faced their doubts about their faith journey. And I remember that young mother, she held my hands and tears streaming down her face, and she looked at me and she said, I will forever recall your tears. But at no time did I ever hear in her words and her heart any anger with God, any frustration with her own life of faith. She had endured this long journey with her family and held fast to her faith because she knew in her heart that someday, she would be reunited once again with her daughter. And I think this is what Paul was trying to tell Timothy in so many words. Timothy, hold on to your faith. You are going to be challenged. You're going to have to endure the persecutions as I have done. But in all things, Timothy, God will bring you through this. I find it interesting that during my time with hospice, I ran into another family I had visited. Two daughters, middle-aged, with a 94-year-old mother. At the time that we made a visit to their home, as we opened the door and we were invited in, one of the first conversations we had with her daughter had nothing to do about her faith or her mother. It had to do with the fact that she had lost her job. And she was angry. And she was angry with God. And she sat there in her frustration and wringing her hands, and she sat there in the chair across from us and said, I don't understand why God did this to me. Why God did this to me. Do you see the differences in our faith? A mother who had lost her 5-year-old daughter to a disease, and a lady who had lost her job. What a contrast in faith. And as we sat there and tried to minister to her, as we shared with her our faith walk, we tried to help her understand that it is such a bigger picture than we can begin to imagine. So how do you and I, as we walk our Christian faith, how do we hold on to our faith in times of trials? Well, I've shared this with you before. Things that we need to be doing in our faith walk. That is taking time to read the scriptures. Taking the time to share our thoughts and feelings with God in our prayers. To have family devotion time together where we can sit there and share our faith and our stories and our frustration. knowing this is all a part of God's plan for our lives. This is what Paul was telling to Timothy. This is what he was sharing with him as he continued his walk of faith. Hold fast to your faith, Timothy. As God was there for me, God will also be there for you.